Warsaw, Poland, the Polish government is speaking with a rare clarity, leaving no room for ambiguity. In the tense hours following the drone incident over Polish skies, the Prime Minister stood before his people and his allies, delivering a message that was both resolute and deeply unsettling for Europe's fragile security. His first words set the tone for what was to follow. Polish Prime Minister, we don't think Russia is behind this provocation. We know it. Those words reverberated through Warsaw, through NATO headquarters and across European capitals. Not a suspicion, not a theory, a declaration of certainty. The Prime Minister acknowledged, however, that such bluntness was not convenient for everyone. There are leaders in Europe who, despite the ongoing war, still hope to maintain a path of dialogue with Moscow. For them, such a hard accusation against Russia complicates already strained diplomacy. But Poland insisted that reality cannot be ignored. Polish Prime Minister, however, I also understand that for all those who would like some kind of normalization, stabilization, some kind of policy of understanding with Russia, this situation is very uncomfortable because if what happened in the Polish skies on the night of September 10th is happening, it's hard to pretend that nothing happened. With this statement, Warsaw pushed back against any attempt to downplay the incident. The Prime Minister then appealed directly to allies, leaving them no space to look away. Polish Prime Minister, I hope that none of our allies will pretend that nothing happened because it did happen. The Prime Minister reminded the nation that Poland is not alone. Support has already poured in from some of Europe's most influential leaders. Polish Prime Minister, there have been unequivocal declarations of practical support for Poland. I heard this very clearly and unambiguously from the President of France, as well as the leaders of Great Britain, the Netherlands and Sweden. This declaration carried strategic weight. France with its traditional caution, Britain with its hard line on Russia, the Netherlands with its security concerns, and Sweden, newly within NATO's fold, all have expressed solidarity. Poland's leadership underscored that while disagreements exist across Europe when it comes to Russian aggression, key capitals are aligning. But Warsaw also emphasized another crucial partnership, its neighbor to the east. Ukraine has been the front line against Russian drone warfare, and Poland intends to strengthen that bond. Polish Prime Minister, we will also cooperate closely with Ukraine on counter-drone systems. This cooperation is not only symbolic, it represents Poland's recognition that its defense cannot be separated from Ukraine's battlefield. The drones that cross into Ukraine today may cross into Poland tomorrow. To Warsaw, a joint shield is the only rational path forward. At the same time, Poland rejected the flood of disinformation narratives attempting to shift the blame onto Kyiv. Moscow has long relied on manipulation, suggesting that incidents of this kind were Ukrainian mistakes or provocations. The Prime Minister dismantled those claims with a decisive statement, Polish Prime Minister. And we reject all the manipulations and disinformation suggesting that Ukraine is behind this attack, that it was a Ukrainian provocation, or that it was a coincidence, an accident, the result of errors. No, our belief here is unequivocal. The Russian Federation is responsible for these events in Polish skies. By placing responsibility squarely on Moscow, Warsaw signalled that Poland refuses to be drawn into confusion or hesitation. Europe may rally, but for Poland, true security lies across the Atlantic. The United States remains the indispensable ally, and Washington's stance carries the most weight. The Prime Minister noted that the matter was not formally discussed at the National Security Council, but even so, the response from Washington was clear and reassuring. Polish Prime Minister, as for Washington, this wasn't a topic of discussion at the National Security Council meeting, but in a brief conversation, President Nari assured me that the Americans absolutely reaffirmed their commitment as an ally and full support for Poland. He then emphasized the depth of this alliance, acknowledging the fluctuations of political temperament, but underscoring the enduring nature of American support. Polish Prime Minister, this is a key ally, the United States, and regardless of the temperament of individual politicians, I am convinced that Poland can also count on its American ally when it comes to our security. This statement, both careful and deliberate, was aimed at reassuring a Polish public deeply aware of US political volatility. Whether it is a Democrat or Republican in the White House, Warsaw is betting that the US commitment to NATO's eastern flank will endure. To understand the weight of these declarations, one must remember Poland's position. It sits on NATO's eastern edge, bordering Ukraine and Belarus within reach of Russia's aggressive posture. For decades, Poland has viewed itself as a shield for Europe. The September 10th incident, drones in Polish skies, only reaffirmed this sense of frontline vulnerability. Article 5 of the NATO treaty, the promise that an attack on one is an attack on all, looms over every conversation. But NATO has historically been cautious in invoking it, wary of sparking direct confrontation with Moscow. Poland's words, however, were a challenge to that caution. Warsaw declared openly that Russia, not Ukraine, was responsible. By doing so, it is pressuring NATO to respond not with silence, but with action. Reactions across the continent are varied but carry an undertone of unease. In Brussels, officials call for calm analysis, yet privately, diplomats admit that if Warsaw insists the incursion was deliberate, Europe will have no choice but to support Poland. France, Britain, Sweden and the Netherlands have already given strong words of solidarity. These declarations mark a significant moment, especially for Paris, which has often walked a fine line with Moscow. London's position is no surprise. Britain has consistently championed hard responses to Russia's aggression. The Netherlands and Sweden joining the chorus is notable. Both nations understand the threat posed by Russian incursions, particularly in the Baltic and North Sea regions. Their inclusion sends a clear message. This is not just Poland's problem. It is Europe's problem. Moscow, predictably, has denied involvement. Russian state media has floated claims that the drone incident was a Ukrainian error or even a deliberate provocation meant to pull NATO deeper into the war. These tactics are familiar, aimed at sowing doubt and weakening Western unity. Warsaw, however, sought to inoculate its population and allies against such narratives. The outright rejection of disinformation was designed to strengthen collective resolve. By naming Russia directly and unambiguously, Poland is stripping away any grey zone. For Poland, the issue is not only external. Domestically, the government's handling of national security remains a cornerstone of its political standing. By taking a firm position, the Prime Minister demonstrates leadership in a moment of crisis, reinforcing the image of a government that will not hesitate to confront Moscow. The blunt language also appeals to a Polish public that has lived for centuries under the shadow of Russian aggression. In this narrative, Warsaw is once again defending Europe's frontier, a role that resonates deeply with national history. The broader question is how NATO itself will respond. Will this incident be treated as an isolated violation, addressed with stronger air defences and stern warnings? Or will it be viewed as part of a larger Russian strategy to probe NATO's resolve? For Warsaw, the answer is obvious. Any hesitation will embolden Moscow. The Prime Minister's words were carefully chosen to leave no space for doubt. He declared Russia's responsibility and counted on allies to back up that claim with concrete steps. What happens next, whether NATO increases its military presence in Poland, invests more heavily in drone defences, or considers new sanctions against Moscow, will determine if this incident becomes a turning point or another forgotten episode in a long cycle of provocations. The Prime Minister's voice carried both determination and urgency. His words, unvarnished and direct, now form part of the continent's fragile security architecture. Let us recall them. We don't think Russia is behind this provocation. We know it. I hope that none of our allies will pretend that nothing happened, because it did happen. There have been unequivocal declarations of practical support for Poland. We will also cooperate closely with Ukraine on counter-drone systems, and we reject all the manipulations and disinformation suggesting that Ukraine is behind this attack. The Russian Federation is responsible for these events in Polish skies. The Americans absolutely reaffirm their commitment as an ally and full support for Poland. Regardless of the temperament of individual politicians, I am convinced that Poland can also count on its American ally. These statements are not merely political theatre. They are lines drawn in the sand. Poland has declared its certainty. Now it looks to its allies in Europe and across the Atlantic to match that certainty with action. As Europe holds its breath, the skies over Poland tell a story of danger, defiance and determination. Whether this story ends with unity or with hesitation will shape the continent's future security for years to come.